Hello and welcome to the second of a three-part video presentation which discusses how companies need to adapt to survive future supply chain disruptions. This video presentation is hosted by GXS and my name is Mark Morley, Industry Marketing Director. Over this series of three video presentations, I've been discussing how companies need to make changes to the way in which they run their supply chains in order to minimize supply chain disruption and at the same time help to increase supply chain resilience. Over the past couple of years, there have been numerous incidents which have impacted supply chains around the world, most notably in the manufacturing sector, where automotive and high-tech companies have been severely impacted. This particular video presentation will discuss how companies have been making a number of operational changes to the way in which they manage their supply chains on a global basis. Many companies, especially in the manufacturing sector, have been busy implementing a number of different operational changes across their businesses. Given that the manufacturing sector is one of the more global industry sectors, it is not surprising that decentralizing operations or spreading the production risk to multiple countries has become a key theme of many companies. Let me now go through some of the more popular ways that companies have been making operational changes to their businesses. During the most recent economic downturn, companies were quick to establish manufacturing locations in low-cost emerging markets or in countries with an abundance of high-quality suppliers. Due to the increasing length of some supply chains, companies started to look for sourcing locations closer to their home markets, with the ultimate aim of trying to shorten logistics networks to speed up the delivery of goods. The recent natural disasters, especially in Japan, have forced some manufacturers to move production back to their home markets at an accelerated rate. Nearshoring or reverse globalization has become a necessity for some companies to stay in business. One example of a manufacturer moving production back to North America is Caterpillar. They decided to move production of one of their more popular mini excavators from Japan to their plant in North America. The increasing value of the Japanese yen has also provided another reason for companies to look for alternative manufacturing locations outside of Japan. In fact, interestingly, I've seen more inward investment in North America in the first 5 months of this year than at any other time since I joined GXS 6 years ago. An alternative to nearshoring has been to ramp up production at alternative production sites around the world. For example, rather than manufacturing one type of product in a specific country, companies are trying to ensure that they can manufacture a specific product at multiple locations. This is essentially spreading the manufacturing risk, so to speak, and thus ensuring continued production during a period of significant disruption. In addition to spreading the manufacturing risk, many automotive companies, for example, have been working to decentralize their design departments. This has been driven by a need to bring the design process closer to the end market. For example, BMW and Volvo have established design centers in China, and Honda announced at the Detroit Motor Show earlier this year that they would be designing and manufacturing their next generation supercar, the NSX, at a new facility in Ohio where their production facilities are based. This decentralized approach to the design of future cars has driven an increasing need to be able to transfer very large CAD/CAM files. As is always the case with these types of situations, other countries were very quick to start marketing themselves to the companies that had been severely impacted in some way. Some governments started to announce investments in state-of-the-art science and technology parks and also offering significant tax breaks if companies invested in their country. One example of this is Taiwan, who were very quick to promote their country to the high-tech companies that had been impacted by the Japanese earthquake and tsunami. Taiwan is keen to raise their profile as being one of the leading countries for high-tech companies to invest in. One area that has been highlighted for immediate improvement is mapping out supply chains. It is one thing to have end-to-end visibility of supply chain transactions, but how many companies know every single company involved across their supply chain? In the case of an automotive company, the car manufacturer will leave it to their Tier 1 supplier to manage their downstream suppliers, i.e. Tier 2, Tier 3 and Tier 4 and smaller suppliers. When Toyota, for example, were impacted by the earthquake, they had no idea how their supply chain was going to be impacted, and they had to rely on key Tier 1 suppliers such as Denso to help them out. Mapping out supply chains has become a key activity over the past 12 months, and many companies have been able to increase their supply chain resilience through embracing this process. Of course, once a company has mapped out their supply chain, the various intercompany relationships need to be maintained on an ongoing basis to ensure that contact information is correct. In this example from Honda, a researcher at Ohio University spent 3 years mapping out every single supplier of the components to the center console of one of their cars. The fact that it took 3 years helps to illustrate why it is important to map out supply chains right at the beginning of the production life of a vehicle, rather than trying to do it retrospectively. Mapping out suppliers in this way has helped Honda to identify key points of weakness across their global supply chain, and has allowed them to implement alternative sources for components should disruption occur at one of their plants in the future. Identifying alternative sources for components, more commonly known as dual sourcing, has become one of the simplest ways that companies have been able to build additional resilience into their supply chains. These alternative suppliers need to be identified very quickly during a time of crisis, and they must have components or parts available should they be required. Dual sourcing may not be required for every component in a product, but it should certainly be considered for all key parts. Over the last few years, companies have been persuaded to reduce their buffer stocks as a way to reduce operational costs, but lean manufacturing, as in this case, is not always a good strategy. In this case, we have started to see many companies start to increase their buffer stocks once again, so that they can ride out the storm, so to speak. Many companies have implemented control towers or centralized locations for being able to monitor supply chain related transactions and activities. Recent natural disasters have seen these control towers take on a new area of responsibility, namely becoming crisis management centers. During a time of crisis, a company needs a centralized approach to how they send out mass communications to trading partners and supply chain participants across the extended enterprise. Once again, as highlighted earlier, unless you have your supplier's contact details in a centralized location, it is going to become very difficult to send out mass communications in any sort of organized manner. One increasing trend I've noticed on professional networking websites, such as LinkedIn or Xing, has been the emergence or rise of the business continuity manager role. This person becomes the go-to employee during a period of disruption. They become the central person who is responsible for steering a company through a period of supply chain disruption. Sometimes referred to as the master of disaster, these people are key to making today's supply chains operate efficiently and seamlessly. The ability to proactively monitor supply chains and almost sense when disruption is likely to occur has become a key competitive weapon that companies have been keen to implement. Increasing regulatory compliance has also made the business continuity manager role more visible in today's extended enterprise. In summary, being unprepared is bad for business. So taking all of these operational improvements into account, there are a number of common themes that start to emerge. Companies need to improve the management of their contact information. They need to increase the day-to-day interaction and collaboration with suppliers. They must have a better understanding of the structure of their supply chains so that they can be easily mapped out. They need to review mass communication procedures so that trading partners can be contacted as soon as disruption occurs. And finally, they need to introduce a crisis management process which allows a business continuity manager to take control and orchestrate proceedings as required. This concludes the presentation. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video presentation. In the third of this 3-part series of video presentations, I will take a look at how B2B solutions can help to minimize supply chain risk. Please remember to look out for parts 1 and 3 of this video presentation series on YouTube. For further information on how GXS Rollstream can help to minimize supply chain disruption and increase supply chain resilience, please contact GXS via the details shown on this slide. Goodbye.